I appreciate you all being here this afternoon, and we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Ms. Julie Powell.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we are very, very excited to hear our presentation from Shoreline Junior High, one of our amazing schools. And I'm going to turn the time over to Mr. Dave Tanner to make introductions.
Hello, President Gerard, Vice President Ms. Price, and wonderful school board members and Dr. Linford. It's good to be with you all this evening and to be able to have you hear the amazing things at Shoreline Junior High School. T.J. Barker opened up Shoreline Junior High School, well, started about 6 years ago. And the school's been open a little over 5 years. And in that time, some incredible things have been happening. He's brought two of his fantastic teachers with him who have served on various committees and things for the school board. So I'm going to have, or not school board, but for the school district. I'm going to have him introduce them and then begin his presentation, which I know you'll love. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Dave. That's kind words there. I will introduce here. We've got some amazing staff at Shoreline Junior High School, and two of the best are here with us tonight. We have Nicole Deaton, she's been a health teacher, the health teacher of the year. She's incredible, but she's made a transition as a coach, a teacher coach and mentor. But she's splitting time with our school and with the district and Devin Healy and his gang, and she is superb. They call her the GOAT there, and it's fitting. And then we have Lori Compton here with us as well. She is a social studies teacher at our school. This year she's just started the DEEP program, and based on the interests, she is rocking it. It's just incredible what she's done. She's come from the elementary school, felt a little bit rusty coming into the junior high school, but has been tremendous. The kids love her. She is an amazing person and teacher. All right, let me make a quick connection here for the slideshow, if we could. Okay. Let's see. All right, here we go. Start it over. Okay, did you do that? Okay. Presenter view. I'm going to just end slide and just restart real quick. Okay. All right, here we go. That's yours? Okay. All right, that's all right. We'll go from here. We'll do it the old-fashioned way. Just a quick note. When we opened Shoreline Junior High School, we had a vision. And the vision was to create a school where we had every student feeling welcome, a place where they're cared for, and an environment conducive to learning. We also wanted to have high expectations for students to achieve. So how have we done in that? Well, we've done well. We're on our journey. We have some vision progress data that I want to share with you. I'm just going to click through these really quickly. I'm not going to take a lot of time on there. But as we go through, just a few things here. All right, some designations that we've received. We want to prepare our students for the 21st century. We want to have high achievement, but we want to prepare them for the 21st century. So we have a couple, I think, some major designations that we worked on and achieved. As far as our acceleration for our 9th grade students, we've had a few students that have advanced grades. That happens at every school. But we have, since 2014, we've raised our number of 9th grade students who are taking extra classes, at least one additional class. Yeah. And that's a quarter of our students are doing that currently. Feeling connected to the school and surveys. Some of this SHARP survey data comes out every 2 years, so 2021, 23, and then this year it comes out. This particular question they don't ask anymore, but I think it's awesome, and it talks about how connected to the school are you. And on that one there, statewide, it's about 20% of their students feel disconnected, where at Shoreline it was half of that. In a 2023 CTE survey, the percent of students who report to have a strong connection to the school, 24% versus the state, which is at 16%. RISE testing, we've continued to perform strong there on district and state levels, and we're proud of this last year for Aspire Plus, the pre-ACT test, to have math and English be the top of the junior high. Math was top overall, including high schools. And the big question is why? What leads to this? Well, I'm going to turn the time over to Nicole and to Lori to tell a little bit more about this story, but they're just going to give you a snapshot on what we believe is the secret to Shoreline performing well.
Okay, thanks, TJ. So the big question then is why? Part of what we believe at Shoreline, we have taken our mascot, which is the shark, and we have turned that into something that is going to help our students and our faculty to build a culture there that is a positive culture. So S is for safe. We want all students and faculty members to feel safe at Shoreline. We want healthy to be a top priority. We want our students and our faculty to be achievers, to be very respectful, and yes, we do know how to spell, but we also want to be connected with a K. And if you ask the students in our school, they will do that, connected with a K. As we were looking at this acronym, we found it very, very interesting that the A for achievement is right in the middle. We feel very strongly with the culture at Shoreline that in order to have these high-level achievers, we need both students and faculty that feel safe and healthy and respectful and connected. We think that all of this is part of what helps us to be successful as a school. So what are some of the things that we are doing in addition to our SHARK code? PBIS and MTSS are a big deal at our school. We want every student to feel that sense of belonging. The SHARK code that I just mentioned, we have these displayed everywhere in the school. This one happens to be one from the cafeteria, and we have them for the hallways, for the classrooms. It is a very common language. If you walk through our school and ask our students, our faculty, what does this stand for, they're going to be able to tell you. So we tie our citizenship right into what our SHARK code is. We have SHARK cards that we consistently give out to our students. And these SHARK cards, we want every student to feel recognized, to reinforce positive behavior. Not just the don't do this, it's the positive. Thank you for being so respectful. Thank you for being safe and healthy. Thank you for connecting with the kids in your class. And then the kids turn these into the office for a little treat, and we have drawings consistently throughout the school year that they can win bigger prizes. SHARK time, that is our advisory time, and we're going to come back to that one here in just a second. Announcements, our administration is very good on the morning announcements to review what that SHARK code is, and if we happen to have something that we need to address as a school, we can tie it back into that SHARK code. So with our advisory, with SHARK time, one of the big purposes of SHARK time is that we want every student in our school to feel a sense of belonging. And SHARK time is a place that we can do that. Shoreline is built upon the foundation of kids before content. Yes, our content, our academics are very important to us, as you could see by that data, but we believe that we are dealing with kids before content. With our SHARK time, our kids are looped. So our students will have the same teacher all 3 years, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade for their SHARK time. So they have a very strong connection with an adult in the building, and they know they have an adult in the building that is an advocate for them. This is where we also incorporate our SEL. We refer to that as SHARK skills. We have a skill of the week, and it's a common vocabulary throughout the entire school. This week, for example, is learn from your mistakes. And we build upon that with our SEL lessons throughout SHARK time. We like to personalize academics in a big way at Shoreline. And one of the ways that we do that, the last 30 minutes of our Shark Time is strictly for academics. And kids can receive intervention by requesting a student request card from a teacher and go get extra help if they need it. There is exploration. There's a Canvas page that we have created that has different links to different websites that they can go and explore further content. And then also that acceleration piece where we have several of our students who are taking extra online classes or trying to receive that honors designation. One other thing with Shark Time that we thought was pretty awesome. Last year at the end of the school year, we gave a survey to all of the students about Shark Time. And it was reported that Shark Time was very helpful academically. In fact, 2/3 of the students that responded said that it was very helpful. And we did not have one student in our entire school who felt that Shark Time was not helpful, which is pretty impressive. We're going to turn some time over now to the one and only amazing Laurie, and she's going to give some personal examples.
Okay, well, I'm so excited to chat with you about my Shark Time class and other classes that I teach. I actually told my Shark Time class today that I got to come and brag about them to the board, and they were very excited to think that I was going to come in and brag about them. So Shark Time is a place where students can feel a sense of community, a place where they belong, where they can feel engaged, and sometimes that is not easily done in a junior high setting, right? But in Shark Time, we kind of create this atmosphere where they do feel like they have this sense of community in a place that they belong. They come in as these quiet, timid little 7th graders, and then because you have them all 3 years, by 9th grade, they are your leaders. And it is so amazing to watch as we have this advisory time. When my 7th and 8th graders need help with an assignment or a project, rarely do they come to me. They're going to each other. And it is so amazing to watch where they can say, okay, have you had this teacher, do you understand this project? And they're learning from each other. And it is so fun to watch them celebrate each other's success, but they will also encourage each other in their times of failure. And it's really a safe place to fail, which is so awesome. It's a safe place to fail where we can encourage each other. I have one example of a student who was in my Shark Time class. She was an 8th grader, and she was currently failing pretty much every single class. And I meet with my students one-on-one regularly, and I was chatting with her, and I said, okay, we're gonna wanna try to make some changes. Next year as a 9th grader, these classes are gonna count towards graduation. We don't want to have these same, some of these same habits where we're failing. And she's like, I'm not really too worried about that because I don't plan on graduating high school. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna take a different approach then. This is a student who I need to make sure can believe in herself and realize her ability and encourage her and help her in ways that maybe I hadn't other students before. And so I asked her, I'm like, okay, if you pass every class next quarter, what would you like? And she's like, I want a cupcake party. I'm like, deal, game on. And so I encouraged her to email every one of her teachers to let them know of the goal that she had made. And somehow, kind of without knowing, the whole class, the whole Shark Time class, became aware of this goal that she had. And they cheered her on probably even more than I did. And they would check in with her to see how she was doing. How are you doing on your goal? How are your classes coming? It all came down to the last class. She needed to pass a test to pass that class. She told our whole class when she left, okay, I'm going to take this test. I need to pass this class to pass every class, or pass the test to pass these classes. And when she came back to our Shark Time class, she walked in with her arms up, I passed the test! And the entire class just, we erupted in excitement and applause, and we did have the best cupcake party ever. So it was so fun, and it's an amazing opportunity to watch students succeed in ways that they probably didn't even know was possible, and that we can all learn from that. Not just the student who succeeded, but every student in there got to learn something from that example and learn from each other. So that's amazing. I also have the opportunity this year to be the DEEP teacher for the 7th grade Utah Studies program. I teach credit recovery. I teach the DEEP Utah Studies program. I also have a regular Utah Studies and a U.S. History class. So I really do feel like I kind of span the academic spectrum in the classes that I teach. And what has been amazing this year is I have taken what I have learned from being a DEEP teacher, those skills and those concepts, and I have turned every single one of my classrooms into a DEEP classroom. On this slide here, you can see some of the depth and complexity icons. We also talk about scholarly habits, And these are vocabulary words that I'm incorporating in every single one of my classes. These become just commonplace, where I have a regular Utah Studies class. I'd like to give you a little example where I've taught this lesson before, but this year we were in our geography unit talking about climographs. And I asked my regular Utah Studies students, I said, okay, I want you to look at these graphs, and I would like you to look for patterns or trends. And so I'm pulling in these depth and complexity icons. And then they're pondering, because we're trying to be scholars. We don't want to immediately raise our hand. Part of being a scholar is pondering and kind of looking at it for a little bit. So they ponder, and then after a little while, this student raises his hand and he said, Mrs. Compton, I've noticed in these 3 climographs that when the temperature goes up, the precipitation goes down. And it doesn't seem to matter what region the climograph is in. This seems to be a trend or a pattern across all 3. And I'm like, you're right, that's amazing. And so by using these deep skills in every single one of my classes, I have seen my students become critical thinkers. They're more engaged in the lessons that I'm teaching, and they really are taking ownership of their education. And it is amazing to just sit back and be able to watch them succeed. So that's a little bit about these classes. So I'll turn it back over to TJ to wrap it up.
Well, not a ton of wrapping up to do because we've got great teachers. I just want to say this, though. This just gives us a taste of what's happening at Shoreline, some of the successes that we've had academically, and we really do attribute it to a deliberate and concentrated school-wide focus on a few things that are important to us. It's a vehicle to help us reach our vision, to have an amazing environment where all students can excel. And instead of excluding and saying we're not going to do an honors program for this kid or that kid, why don't we create a system in which we have an honors student curriculum for every kid, where they can reach their optimal levels and really thrive. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Let's give them a clap. That was Thank you so much for that presentation. We are very impressed with what you're doing and appreciate so much the work that you're putting into your students and making each one feel important and feel like they belong. I love that you've tied your vision and goals to your SHARC name, and that it's so visible throughout the school and that the students know about it and they're working on that. And I love that it aligns so well with our vision and goals as a school district and as a school board, and the work that we're doing in belonging. You're really making an effort to join in that, and I just love that. So impressed with your presentation and what you're doing. Thank you very, very much. And board and superintendent, we need a cupcake party. Yeah.
Can I add? Yeah. I just want to make a quick comment. I've loved watching this school because I was one of the people in the room when Principal Barker, I almost called you TJ, you know, Principal Barker made his first pitch to the superintendency and the directors on his vision for this school, and it's awesome to see it 6 years later and to see the great things you've done as a team and as a staff. And it's a special thing to open a school and to be able to build the culture from the ground up, and just really appreciate the work. And you didn't rest on your laurels at all and just took care of business. So thank you. It's good for kids.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, next we are going to have the very exciting Open and Public Meetings training by Mr. Onofrio.
And no one will judge Shoreline if they all just leave right now.
If you want to go, you can go. Ben might feel a little sad, but thank you.
Are you going to take that? Yeah. Well, there's nothing quite as exciting as opening a school except for legal compliance. So
Right.
It's that time of year again. We have an annual training on Open and Public Meetings Act. This will be a review for many of you, but this is new to some of you. So the philosophy behind the law here is that meetings are open to the public unless they're explicitly closed. And the purpose is to ensure that the public's meeting is done in public. Let's go through some vocabulary. Who's a public body? You guys are. You are a group of government officials elected to spend public money and act on behalf of the people that elected you. There are some exceptions to that, namely the legislature is accepted from this, and so are political parties. Quorum is at least 4 of you, and that covers our vocabulary. So the definition of meeting has actually changed. So this will be new to all of you, I believe. Since our last training on this, Representative Dunnigan put through some legislation in the last session that changed the meaning of this. And you could probably spend some time looking at this definition and be like, okay, so what is the difference exactly? It doesn't look very different on the surface. In the past, a meeting was defined as, let's see, a gathering of a quorum for the purpose of discussion or action, and there was an explicit safe harbor which excluded chance or social meetings. So the new definition is when an authorized individual convenes a gathering for the express purpose of acting as a public body to receive public comment about a relevant matter, deliberate about a relevant matter, or take action about a relevant matter. And so what's a relevant matter? Also defined in the statute. Relevant matter is something that's within the scope of the authority of the board. And there is a little bit of a carve out here for managerial operational matters are not relevant matters. So, for example, when are we going to meet again? Operational matter. Should we change this policy? Relevant matter. So a little bit of a difference there. So it still looks like there's a little bit of a safe harbor from listening to Representative Dunnigan talk about this on the floor. But it's not as explicit as it was in the prior definition. And so my sense is that the new definition actually loosens the definition of a meeting, which is good for us, makes it harder to commit a violation. But I'll still advise you to exert all caution in holding public meetings carefully and closing meetings for the appropriate purposes. So sometimes what throws us off here is we can also meet electronically. We can convene electronically. And when the board does this involving a majority of members, we need to watch out we haven't inadvertently created a public meeting without notice to the public. So one way you can actually do that is through an email. So you don't actually have to have a recording going and having us physically all here to have what's technically could be a meeting. We could actually do that accidentally through an email. So if we're discussing a relevant matter as board members in a quorum, that could be a meeting, arguably, that would be a violation of the Open Meetings Act because it's just in your email and not here in an open public meeting. So be careful when you're CCing on things that are relevant matters. Of course, the president or anyone else on the board can send out an initial information packet or whatever, or say, hey, did you see this new bill that came out? You should all read this. Those are not violations, but if the person responds to the whole board and says, well, I think we should put in a policy into place that does this, that could be a violation of the Open Meetings Act. So just be cautious in your replies and your reply alls. It's best to have those one-on-one conversations. You can actually meet remotely. So as long as according to policy, as long as 4 of you are physically present, up to 3 of you can be at home if you want, or somewhere else on vacation or whatever. The way that works is if you're a person who wants to meet remotely, you have to alert the president at least 3 days prior. You have to alert everyone on the board at least 1 day prior. Oops, something's happening to my thing. And the board president will announce if there's a remote persons on the board in the meeting and say, here's this person. And when we've done this before, we had an iPad that had like their face, which was kind of fun. It does it. That would be really cool. Then no one would want to come, right? As far as discussions at your meeting, I'd advise you to not individually text or group text during the meeting about the relevant matters. That, again, can be that can be a way you can close the meeting inadvertently. We advise you to say it so everybody can hear. The other thing to remember is that those texts are subject to GRAMA. Even if no one had heard them, they could be GRAMA'd, and you would have to release those work-related texts. Let's see. I can also advise you not to retain your texts. You don't have to keep them unless there's been a request for them, which you do have to keep them until we've revealed them to the requester. So you can set on your phone that it won't automatically retain your messages back and forth to each other. And then if there's a request for an email, or sorry, for a text message that you've deleted, it doesn't have to be given out. All right, rolling quorums. So you may have heard the term rolling quorum. That's kind of what I was talking about, having this situation where you have people meet kind of piecemeal or daisy chain these meetings where a couple of members will meet with another member, and then they swap out that member, and eventually there's a quorum established talking about a relevant matter. So we can kind of confuse ourselves to think, well, there's never going to be 3 people all at once in the same room. But if we kind of swap out people to where we actually have more people talking about that relevant matter, that's what's called a rolling quorum. So we advise you to stay away from those and be cautious about creating a rolling quorum on accident. It's sometimes also called a constructive quorum, a walking quorum, or legislative musical chairs. Let's see. So courts in other jurisdictions have held that this is a violation of their Open Meetings Act. Our jurisdiction isn't big enough for us to actually have a case law on this, but I can see by analogy that this could be subverting the spirit of the law. So the short test for you to remember is, does this conversation involve a majority of board members? Does it involve public funds or discussion of board decisions? You're likely going to be serving or already serving on 3-person committees. So keep in mind the matters that those 3-person subcommittees are discussing. If you discuss that with one person outside of that subcommittee, you may be creating a rolling quorum inadvertently. The rest of this is mostly just, that's a quote that's kind of interesting about rolling quorums from another jurisdiction. That's essentially just saying we can accidentally create these rolling quorums that would violate the spirit of the Sunshine Law. So the rest of this is mostly about process, and we keep this pretty simple for you guys because our hardworking staff members cover most of this for you, and you don't have to worry about it. But just remember that every public meeting must have at least a 24-hour notice, except when the qualified emergency applies. You have to notice the time, date, and location of the agenda. The agenda must provide the public reasonable specificity as to the topics to be considered at the meeting. So in other words, each topic should have its own agenda item. This comes up sometimes when we think, well, can we add an extra agenda item here because it's kind of like what we're already talking about. I'd advise us to be very careful about that and make sure that each item is specifically and laid out with reasonable specificity, and we don't do add-on things that aren't really related to that one issue. Closed meetings, you've had the opportunity to all be a part of that. The way these work is we have to start with an open meeting with a quorum present. We need a 2/3 vote to move to a closed meeting, and we need to state the reason for moving to a closed meeting. There are very specific reasons that we can have a closed meeting, which are labeled up there. We have to also state the location of the closed meeting. Usually it's something like, we're going to meet upstairs after this for a closed meeting for the purpose of property or something like that. And then you can do a simple voice vote. You don't have to go through one by one. You can say all in favor, aye, and if, it's almost never, I've never been here when somebody said I don't want to go to closed meeting publicly. We may feel that way, but you can do a simple voice vote, and then you can say at the end, let the record reflect that the vote to go to a closed meeting was unanimous. So what can't you do in a closed meeting? You cannot approve policies, contracts, or appointments of positions. You can't interview a person to fill the elected position. You can't take a final action. And I'd advise you against taking straw polls. While we may discuss things, we don't want to say something like, well, let's get kind of an initial idea of how people, and then have people vote. That could be confused with an actual vote. So we don't want to probably do that. Final votes must be open and on the record. So an open meeting is not a public forum. There's a term of art called a limited public forum and a public forum. When we think about public forums as a term of art, that's like the sidewalk, that's the public park. That's some place where First Amendment rights are at their zenith. A limited public forum is what we're doing here. So people can't just stand up and start shouting. People can't come interrupt the meeting. This is the public's business, but it's your meeting to do the public's business. And we have the right, or the board president has the right, to exclude people from the meeting who are disruptive to that meeting. Let's see. So keeping a record, another thing our great staff mostly takes care of. One thing to keep in mind is that the written minutes are not a transcript. So you're never going to find a perfect iteration of exactly everything you've talked about here. It's more of like a quick reference point for what you may have talked about. They contain the date, time, and place, the matters discussed. It's discretionary even to include comments of board members. but we typically will include individuals from the public recognized by the presiding officer and the substance of their comments. This recording is permanent. The minutes, however, are the official record of the board. The recording is usually available within 3 days. Minutes and drafts are available a reasonable time after meeting and within 3 days of being officially approved by the presidency. Open meetings are public records, closed are protected. Now, even though we're in closed meeting and that record is protected, we are required to make an audio recording of the whole meeting, and those are required to be retained. So some people often ask me about, well, what happens if we don't follow the Open Meetings Act? Well, technically, if you do so intentionally, you can get a criminal punishment for that. I've never seen one. I hope to never see one. And we could also be sued, which can cost us money even if we win. So generally, a successful suit against the board for a violation of the Open Meetings Act would overturn the decision. And make that a result, a decision that was made as a result of those unofficial meetings. Now, there may be attorney's fees attached to that, even if it's just injunctive relief. In other words, if the decision was overturned, typically the remedy that is applied is that you have to hold the meeting again in public and then discuss the matter, make the decision in public. But if we go through all the litigation to get there, we still have to pay if we lose for the attorney's fees. Let's see. So the Open Meetings Act is decades old. I've never seen a case where somebody gets a criminal punishment, but I don't want to be the first either. So kind of in closing, here are some things you can ask yourself before making a communication with other board members to see if we can stay out of accidentally having a closed meeting. So are we communicating regarding a relevant matter? Will we be taking a vote on the matter? How many board members are involved in the communication? Is it a quorum? Is this a series of communications through electronic means that totals a quorum? Is there any evidence of trying to circumvent the spirit of the law? Are my emails or text messages public records subject to disclosure under GRAMA? And the last point is just remember, even if we aren't holding an unofficial meeting or an illegal closed meeting, what we say in our email, what we say in our text is the public's business when it relates to the public work that we do. So I know the lawyers are no fun at meetings, or parties rather. Sometimes you may feel like I'm trying to wrap you in bubble wrap, but my point is here that I am trying to keep you on the right side of the violations and in compliance. And if you have additional questions, I'm happy to take them here or after the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Onofrio. That was a great training. Are there any questions from any board members? Okay, I guess you did a great job. No questions. Thank you so much. Okay, next on the agenda, we have a boundary study update, and Ms. Tracy Robbins or Ruth Ann Keller, I'm not sure. Is Ruth Ann? There she is. I don't know who's coming up to start, but you can introduce. Who's helping you out?
We're just going to come up together. Thank you, President Gerard. Thank you, school board member and Superintendent Linford. We have had so much fun visiting our clusters, and so I thought we'd take some time and kind of bring you up to date to that point.
Great. We've met with all but the Layton cluster, and we'll meet with them Thursday about the phase 4, where we're looking at everything south of Antelope. And so far, we're just sharing the issues with the principals, with school leaders, and showing them, because it's easy to know what's going on at your school, but sometimes you don't know what's happening in the surrounding areas. And you'll think, oh, if I just got some kids from that next door school, we'd be fine, not realizing that they're 200 short as well. So, and then from them, we ask in those meetings, if it were up to you, would you, what schools, it comes down to what schools would you consider closing? And some of them are very reluctant to say anything, and some have put forth some ideas. And so from some of those ideas, we will go back and start looking, well, what would happen if we did this? What would happen if we did this? And our communications department is going to really help principals come up with that message, because although you voted for it in November, I don't think the public's really aware of how in-depth we're going. And we don't really have a timeline for it either, just that we're working on it right now. So that's going on behind the scenes. For the major things that are happening right now that will be part of the public hearing on March 18th are the temporary recommendations at Eagle Bay and Canyon Creek and the boundary change at Sunburst. And so we've had the boundary email open for anybody, but those are the ones that we've received responses on. And so we've received a total of 60 emails. Some of them were repeat people, but the ones from Eagle Bay and Canyon Creek, most of them that are responding are trying to give long-term solutions, which we did solicit, even though they're not what we're putting before the board right now. And another huge number of them were people from Canyon Creek worried that we were overfilling Canyon Creek, or people from Eagle Bay that they're going to lose prep time, they're going to lose, and they just didn't understand that we're only really talking about 10 children right now. So it was mostly just informing them of where it is, but they're really anxious for a long-term solution, and we don't really have that right now, and it's not the right timing if we had one. At Sunburst, we've got people that just mostly want us to send somebody else. We had an open house, and we held it at Sand Springs because the group that we're proposing to move used to go to Sand Springs and are being proposed to move back to Sand Springs. We had fewer than 30 people come to the open house, and at the open house, the principal, Johnson, was so great to take people around and show them the school. I think some of them, because it's been 5 years, a lot of them, they weren't familiar with Sand Springs, and they really don't want to go because they lose their bus, and they go from a brand new school to an older school, and several of them are very against the immersion program. So those were the issues, and so Mrs. Johnson was able to take them around and show them Sand Springs may not be as new as Sunburst, but it's a beautiful school in great condition. She shared several of the programs, like the robotics and the after-school things, and the things that they were afraid they were going to lose by leaving Sunburst, and just did a really good job. One of the interesting proposals that came out of that open meeting was, the open house, was that they proposed that they continue to get bused to Sunburst, and we take a group that's farther away from Sand Springs, from out of Sunburst, so that they would also get a bus to Sand Springs, so that nobody loses their bus. And although that's a creative idea, that really isn't on our list of things to do, is to try to make sure that people still keep their busing. And so we still, even though we've almost in the past of other open houses made minor little changes, we haven't suggested any changes since then. And I think most of the people felt at least better after that open house, but they still don't want to lose their bus and their wonderful new school. That pretty much covers the kinds of things that have come up. So we've done the surveys, the email, taken the public comment, and had the open house. Do you have any questions?
Go ahead, Julie.
So I think I asked you this before, but this was asked of me again. So Heritage, which is right close to Sunburst, when they did the previous boundary, that was associated with Sunburst. Any thoughts about where, or are you just going to do their boundary stuff separate with the Antelope and South boundary thing?
Right now, just looking at what's happening there, I don't have a nearby neighbor, except for Sunburst, that could share with them, if you're just looking at the map. Mm-hmm. So I don't see any hope from Sunburst, because if you helped them, then you wouldn't help Sand Springs. The group that would go to Heritage, if you look at the map, is much closer to Sunburst, and so they didn't make nearly as much sense as that group that's not even contiguous to go from Sand Springs. So the answer right now is we don't have an answer for Heritage. It'll take more in depth. It might be something like just trying to look at the whole picture. We haven't met with the Layton cluster yet, but maybe it's something of closing something Layton and moving people south and then people west. I haven't envisioned that yet, and we haven't had any recommendations from principals doing that yet. And so right now I have no solutions for Heritage.
Okay.
Any other questions, board?
Bridget?
Yes.
I just have a question too. About how people are being notified. Is it just through email? And then also with the long-term solution, what is the timeline? I think you maybe presented that last time. I can't remember.
I don't have the timeline. I was told a 2 to 5 year study. So if they're ready, if you or the superintendency are ready to move ahead with something, after we meet with the Layton cluster, we'll have all of their input. That we'd be ready to start studying a little bit more. My recommendation would be to study, once you determine an area, would be to study 5 or 6 schools within that area, because if you just let me narrow it down all by myself, then you get the public perception that we really didn't look at anything, even though I may have looked at each one individually, but I didn't share that information. So I think it'd be really important to determine, do we want to do a whole bunch of closures at once? Do we want to have next year we just look at one in maybe the most pressing area, or a couple in the most pressing area? So I think we'll be looking for direction from you through the superintendency for that, of what you'd like to see happen and how quickly you'd like to see it happen.
Okay, any other questions, board? When is the Layton meeting and where?
It
And what
is,
time? The cluster?
It's at 10:30 on Thursday, somewhere a training room out at Freeport.
We are doing it in between leadership, so it'll be out at F2, and we're in the federal programs conference room. Okay.
Got it.
So I'll get to F2 and somebody will show me where to go.
It's a big place.
Can I just add one more thing to Ms. Stevens' question? We actually talked about this today, and Doug Forsgren, perfect answer. We're going to send that communication out after we meet with Layton Cluster, so it's coming from every principal at the same time, so that we can avoid the conversations of one community hearing it before the next community. And then all of the links and feedback and opportunity for parents to actually go to the website and view the FAQs, all of the things that our communications department has put up will be available and ready to go online. Okay.
Great.
And that was a great suggestion from the communications department. Terry Hall was there today saying, instead of each principal writing their own email saying our school's under study, then somebody thinks, oh, they've already decided to close our school, that they help craft that and then it all go out at once, even if the message is a little bit different. And then they have established links that aren't hot yet, but for each school to give their input, because we really would want to hear what they think should happen in their area. But I don't think that most of the public knows the severe shortage that we're in right now. In fact, a few of the comments we got just at the couple of community council meetings we went to was, well, what's wrong with a small school? Why don't you just hire 3 or 4 more teachers and use those rooms and have smaller class sizes? And that's just a lack of understanding how we fund and what we really can do. So our communications department has their hands full trying to get the message out, because closing schools is very unpopular, but when they understand that there just aren't children being born to fill them, we've got to do something.
Yeah. And there's a few other factors that go along with that, leading to the decline in enrollment. So, any other questions, board? Ms. Powell?
Quick one. So just to clarify, I think you said this initial study is just elementary. We're not looking at secondary initially, correct?
Right.
Okay. Okay, if there are no other questions, thank you, Ms. Robbins. Thank you, Ms. Van Natter. We appreciate that update. Okay. Our last agenda item is a presentation on belonging and inclusion, and this includes our quarterly report. And Dr. Montero, I'll let you start. Introduce anyone else who might be helping you out.
All right. Well, good afternoon, President. Thank you for having us. President Gerard, on behalf of our team here, so there's 4 of us presenting this afternoon. Mr. Nash, Mr. Hill, Dr. Karen Dunkley. She's celebrating still the Super Bowl victory by the Eagles.
Yes.
So if she comes off with a little bit of flair, now you understand why. Yeah. So President and members of the board and Superintendent, Mr. Tim, who's over there, thank you for having us. So we have a really, what I think is a presentation that's really worth everyone's time. I did tell Mr. Rick Astle to hold his applause till we're finished, because sometimes he gets so excited about this that he wants to break out in a clap. So here we have 3 quick objectives that we want to share with the board today. The first one, we want to reinforce our commitment and alignment to the legal requirements under the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and under the Equal Protection Clause of the United States Constitution. So that's going to be my job. Our second objective is to provide you an update of the state of our belonging efforts here in Davis School District. And then our third objective is to present to you what we're currently learning about that's going to impact the future of our work. So between the 4 of us, we're going to achieve these 3 objectives. You've often have heard me speak about our work in business terms in some ways, right? And it's anything but transactional, and yet the way we've approached our work has been with a lens, with the spirit of entrepreneurship. We've tried to be as efficient in our efforts. We've tried to apply good business principles to the work that we're doing, because when we first started, we started up as a startup. I mean, we were barely 2.5 years old. We're still in our infancy as an organization. And to be able to innovate in an existing organization that's as rich of tradition and as rich of culture as Davis has been, we needed to take that approach. And if you look at those 3 phases on your screen, that's how we've been thinking about our work. Phase 1 was really establishing baseline, establishing process procedures, and really understanding the work that was in front of us. The second phase was all about evaluating our data, making pivots, talking to people, students, teachers, parents, and really learning from our mistakes, really trying to understand what we were doing well, what we weren't doing well, and in essence, trying to then to start to generate profit, if you may. We're entering, I feel, what you would consider a phase 3 of our work, right? Where we're actually now really digging in, understanding who we are, understanding what distinguishes us as a department, in essence, understanding our product well, but continuing to go back to phase 1 and phase 2. Our department is really good at self-evaluating, at self-reflecting, and at making pivots on the fly. And if anything, our department probably tires from making so many pivots, but we're doing it in the spirit of, again, efficiency, and in the spirit of making sure we're customer-based, customer and service-oriented. Just in the past several weeks, there's been a lot of interesting conversation about what's happening with the OEO department as we have shifted at the federal government administrations, right? And I was really grateful for a letter that the Department of Education put out on Friday. It was a Dear Colleague letter where they really emphasized the work that we're doing. And in fact, the quote that you see on your screen is taken from that letter from the current acting Assistant Secretary of Education. And he said, discrimination on the basis of color, race, or national origin is illegal and morally reprehensible. All students are entitled to a school environment free from discrimination. And if you think about our work, it couldn't be better summarized than how the current administration is defining it and reminding us of our commitment to the 14th Amendment to make sure that every child that attends our schools does so in a safe environment, in an environment where they can walk in and have the knowledge that they're not going to get picked on because of who they are, regardless of how they pray, what they look like, where they come from. And that's our commitment. And as I was listening to Shoreline Junior High, which, by the way, they did an excellent job presenting their own efforts as a junior high school, I was thinking of the skills, the most valuable skill that I would want my child to leave public education with. And regardless of what field they entered, whether it's medicine, whether it's business, whether it's education, I would want them to understand how to treat others, how to disagree with others in a way that's kind, how to stand up for what they believe in, how to stand up for their values, and yet also, again, how to be a human being that is respectful of those around them. And that's the work that we're trying to do. One of my favorite authors, I reflected on some of his insights this afternoon when we had our Belonging Council, and Bridget attended for her first meeting with, this is a group of community members that represent different industries and different areas of our community. And I shared with them a quote from Robert Putnam, he's been a longtime political scientist. He teaches at the Harvard Kennedy School. But I got to know him because of a relationship he has with Matt Holland, who I worked with at Utah Valley University. And in his book, Bowling Alone, he argues for the virtue of community and civic engagement. And this is a quote from him. He says, "School performance, public health, crime rates, clinical depression, tax compliance, philanthropy, race relations, community development, census returns, teen suicide, economic productivity, campaign finance, even simple human happiness are all demonstrably affected by how and whether we connect with our family and friends and neighbors and co-workers." Another very simple definition of the work that we're doing as a department. And when you think about high reliability schools, you don't have reliability schools without the work that we're engaged in terms of building community and building environment for our children. So with that note, Mr. Hill and Mr. Nash are going to talk to you about what's currently happening in our efforts of belonging. So, gentlemen.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I want to start just by framing I'm going to share some data, a snapshot at a district level, but framing the data within the Office of Equal Opportunity, our mission and our vision statement, because we did change our mission when Mr. Nash and I took over the office, and really our work is about upholding student dignity and maintaining that. And when it does get infringed upon or violated, we're going to respond, and because we can't do that. We can't accomplish our vision, which is creating a culture of belonging for every student in every space in our school. That is what we're after. We can't do that unless we uphold student dignity. However, I'm going to show you a snapshot of some data from our first semester. This comes from our quarter 2 report that we give to our accountability partners. And I'll start with just the total number of cases. So this goes up through winter break. We investigated 1,587 allegations of harassment or discrimination or some conduct in the building that violated our policy 11IR-100. And so I have a breakdown of conclusions here for you. We screen all cases against the 3 prongs of harassment. Is it objectively offensive? Is it based on a person's protective class? And did it impact that individual? And about 18% of our cases for first semester, we were finding harassment, and this is how we treat it. Now, if something violates our policy but doesn't arise to a harassment, we classify that as a policy violation, and we have mandates for when that happens. We also had cases that we investigated that we didn't find a policy violation. This might be an allegation that maybe it was political speech, and students are allowed to have political opinions, and sometimes people just don't agree with those things. And then another 11% of our cases we found insufficient evidence. But I want to emphasize that even when there's not a policy violation or if there's insufficient evidence, or in any of these cases, we always offer students supportive measures when they're making an allegation, because we know that student is in a place where they feel like they've been harmed, and so we're going to help support them through our investigation process. So we also classify, we track certain types of data, trends that we see, and based on historic data that's shown that we've had a problem. And our data continues to show that there is a significant issue in our schools that we need to continue to address. And so you can see the breakdown here by high school, junior high and elementary, and still the largest thing we are addressing is the use of the N-word in our schools. It is still pervasive. And if you compare that with other categories such as monkey that sometimes gets used toward our black students, or general comments about black students, you can see that our black students are still a target of harassment in our schools. You might ask the question we were just asked at a recent parent circle, that there seemed to be this narrative amongst our community that it was students of color who were primarily using the N-word. That is not true. In fact, in our data, in our cases, students who are white are using the N-word at about 3 to 1 of our cases of a student who's black. If you combine all of our students of color, our white students are still using it at about a ratio of 2 to 1 in our case data. And it's more likely to be used in a way to harass other students. The other area that we see continually is comments, words, things said toward our students who may be of the LGBTQIA community, or that issue just gets weaponized and used toward other students. In fact, that number, almost half of those were due to a TikTok trend that came out in October that we were trying to get ahead of, where students, were engaging in this behavior and using the word gay in a demeaning way in all kinds of varieties. So you can see kind of our types of cases that we're dealing with. We did also notice something recently I just want to point out. If you look at our case data by proportion of cases that we're dealing with a certain protected class, we saw a dramatic shift when we came back from winter break. And so this data is actually about 2 weeks old. If I were to run it today, it would even be heightened, I would say. So if you take a look at our quarter one and the total proportion number of cases we were dealing with this protected class, and then quarter two and then quarter three, you can see that gender identity has had a spike. Whether that issue just has been used against students. Again, students can have opinions on the matter. You don't get to use your opinion to harass another student. Another area that the protected class that we're seeing a spike in is in national origin cases. You can see that at the beginning of the year, about 3 to 4% of our cases were based under that protected class of national origin. And these are cases that we had findings of harassment. And then quarter three, which just as a reminder, we're only halfway through quarter three. And so these numbers tend to be increasing. We're seeing a lot of the socio-political national conversation filter into our schools, as you can imagine it would. And then another area, if we remove all students who are non-Hispanic and then add in cases of students who are Hispanic, we've seen a dramatic increase of conduct that's targeted toward our Hispanic populations. Again, some that student level of understanding of national politics filters in and sometimes gets used. However, we are seeing progress as well. This is our weekly case count, plotted this up through February 6th. And you can see that we're dealing with hot spots and we're dealing with a little bit of lulls. But overall, on average, we're going down in terms of weekly case count. And we attribute that to the work of our school leaders and the what's happening in schools and the level of understanding of what happens. Now, I want to include that when we address these cases, in any time that we find harassment or a policy violation, that mandate that we have students go through is always based in education. There might be a punitive measure that's also taken, perhaps a suspension or a removal from class or a lunch detention, but it's always with education. And I'm happy to report that our number of recidivism has gone down. Currently, we're about 9% of our cases are from a repeat respondent, which shows that education is having an impact. And so I'm just grateful that we're all engaged in this work, that we continue to do so because it's really necessary for our kids and for our district mission. I'm going to turn the time over to Director Nash.
Thanks, man. I'm going to just talk to you about our professional development work. And I'll have a handout here for you here in a second. So you can see the 3 different categories here where we work with our school climate and cultural goals. I have to get into the mic, sorry. Where we work with our schools, with our school culture and climate goals, and I'll get more into detail about that after I talk about our priority schools and our cultural liaison trainings. I actually want to give a shout out to Shoreline. We actually, they were presenting today, but we actually had their assistant principal, Bertoldi, actually present at a cultural liaison meeting last week. And the reason why we had him come out because we've been just so impressed of how efficient they get their cases done and the manner they address their cases. And we asked them to share with how you do that and why you're doing such a good job. And the first thing he shared, in addition to organizational skills and some of these things, is the administration staff, they get to know their students. They know them by name, and it makes a huge difference on the response and how students and teachers are receiving the feedback. Teacher focus groups, Dr. Dunkley will talk about that here in a few minutes. At the beginning of the year, and you can see these on all of our websites, at the beginning of the year we have the all-student professional development where we talk about what belonging is and how you report harassment and discrimination. Our staff, we actually go out to schools quite often to do assemblies. A lot of times our principals are actually asking for us to come to talk to specific groups. Sometimes we're not even doing assemblies for the whole school. It might be a hot pocket for a 5th or 6th grade group or 3rd through 6th grade, and so we just target it to those areas. And almost immediately we see a decline in our cases. We presented today with our belonging councils today, and of course our community councils. I'm going to take one of these and pass it around. I really wanted to focus on our priority schools initiative, and just to kind of clarify where the name came from. As part of our settlement agreement and our culture and climate plan, we saw in our data what schools had the most harassment and discrimination cases, and clearly that was our junior highs. And so we created a priority schools curriculum to help support schools on how to better create environments where all of our kids are feeling connected to the schools. And it went so well last year, and we saw a decline in our cases, and as you see, that's still happening. We said we need to do that with our elementary schools and high schools. And so this just kind of gives you a background of what we've done and kind of what the follow-up will be. This is more geared towards elementary, but it pretty much mimics what we're doing with our high school as well. You see what we did here at our first meeting, just kind of setting the backdrop of why we're here, why our office is here. We provided them some resources on how to get started. In October, Dr. Montero provided an effectiveness assessment report and student data so they can understand really what our students were saying. And then they did a self-assessment of their schools, a belonging audit to self-reflect on areas of improvement that they need in their schools in this space and what they're doing well. And then in November, a big focus of that training was on culturally responsive, sustainable pedagogy, and just focusing on the fundamental human need, that we all have to belong, and the impact that has on a student's experience at school. And then that all culminates in what we're describing as a priority school symposium. So every school will come and give us about a 7 to 10 minute presentation on what the school year has been like, what they've learned, what their data has shown, how they're going to respond to their data, and that's all going to be kind of culminated into a culture and climate goal that is going to be a part of their TSSP plan. So as you're visiting schools, that is a discussion that they should be having at their community council meetings, because it is a goal that is required of them to have in their TSSP plans. So take a look at that. I think we're gonna, if you have any questions, I think we want to make sure we give Dr. Dunkley some time, but we'll be grateful to take some questions after she's done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're really excited to be here to present the teacher focus group data. We implemented the teacher focus groups in November 2024. The visionaries of the project supported by, of course, Dr. Linford, our superintendent, Assistant Superintendents John Zerbakken and Vidal Montero, to really align to the work of high reliability schools so that we could engage teachers, hear their perceptions, hear their voices about the work of belonging and inclusion, so that it would serve as a lead and indicator as we finish the year and continue the work. Before we delve right into the research, we must acknowledge a great partner in the room, Dr. Greg Wilkie. Please give him a hand from the Office of Assessment. I would be remiss standing here today. As happy as I am for the Eagles, I'm even more excited and delighted to partner with Dr. Wilkie and his entire team. The demographics, we had 195 teachers who participated in the focus groups. We really must state that the age, we had 67 in terms of the oldest, and we had 23 years old. So we see quite a range of participants. We primarily had females who participated, and we did, of course, have some males. Just in terms of something on the mean, like the average tenure of teachers in Davis who participated in the focus group, 10 years. We had someone who worked in the district for 32 plus years. And we also had one teacher who was here for 1 year. So really interesting data in terms of the demographics. So we're going to jump right into what the teachers had to say. The research team comprised from universities here in Utah, BYU, UVU, Weber State, Teachers College Columbia, and Oxford University coming out of the UK, aligned the instrument to specific themes. And we will not read each slide, but just summarize. Regarding district initiatives and perceptions, teachers felt very strongly that the district efforts should center on more systemic changes, and that where we were right now, that we did some celebration, but they were excited and looking forward to more opportunities to clearly integrate belonging and inclusion in their classroom. They did highlight the impact of morning meetings as successful opportunities to build relationships. In the high school, they spoke to advisory, really being very proactive ways to build community. Teachers expressed a desire for agency and a cohesive message, really saying, hey, we want more autonomy around the work of belonging and inclusion in our classroom. They did ask for the district to share a unified vision on what the work of belonging should look like and could look like, and some frameworks that they could use. Regarding the externalization of responsibility, that simply means that while they applaud the work of the district liaisons that sit in the Office of Equal Opportunity, they're also asking that they have the opportunity to build their capacity to turn around that training and to implement the conversations you heard Mr. Nash, he spoke about them earlier, themselves in their own school communities and within their PLCs. We did see very nuanced for elementary teachers. They really believed in the strength of early interventions, that if we could do this in the elementary schools, then we would win by the time the students graduated to junior high and high schools. In terms of the burden placed on staff of color felt that they needed more allyship and would appreciate a more collaborative space, that the work of belonging not only should include them because they were persons of color, but it's an entire community effort. And then we spoke about the positive practices before. What was really compelling was the time constraint. And those of us who haven't been teachers, we never have enough time. So they really mentioned the need for fun, that they wanted to bring fun back, that they felt that they had limited time and opportunity to collaborate, and that they wanted some flexibility in their classroom to be able to get to this fun again around belonging. And that, of course, is coupled with the conundrum of what was happening or is happening in the external environment. There is a sense that teachers were fearful, They're not sure what they can say, what they can't say, how, for example, would recent legislation impact their work, and how would that land on the community in case they were to say something that they believe they should not have done so. So that is a big clarity point. And we know that we implemented a new ELA curriculum. So while they appreciate the foresight, they also ask for more opportunity and support in balancing the pacing requirements and being able to bring together the sense of community and belonging in their classroom, as well as having an opportunity to be able to include some supplemental materials that would be deemed appropriate as well. Professional development had mixed reviews. Some teachers applauded the district efforts. They believe that the strongest points, the reporting protocols, every teacher identified and were able to speak to how to report. They did ask that we loop back with them regarding the outcome, certainly respecting the FERPA, the privacy laws. They also spoke about ongoing professional development. So we do implement at the beginning of the year the all staff training. They're asking for sustained, continued touches throughout the school year. In terms of the policy clarity, we spoke a little bit about that. So one key opportunity here, and we mentioned this before, very low-hanging fruit, just really for us at the building level to say to a teacher who's given a report, this is the outcome or the matter was handled. Just to point to you, we know that you have the slides, but at the bottom of each of the themes, we have pulled out certain quotes, the direct voices of the teacher themselves, but we're not able to read those individually due to time. So in terms of awareness of policies, procedures, and reporting, really very strong and compelling feedback in terms of what teachers believe, how they engage with the reporting process, and how they would like for us to close the loop as district leadership. And then finally, in terms of the effectiveness to address racism, discrimination, bullying, and harassment in our schools, they did again speak to this need to build bridges with the community, to really engage and support them in reaching out and communicating and connecting with parents, really building the collaborative space. What really stood out to the research team is that teachers expressed very strong interest and determination in continuing the belonging and inclusion work. That was a very strong theme that they would like to see this work continue throughout the decades in Davis School District. They also asked, which was so interesting, for district leadership to come out, because they really would love for them more to see what's happening in the classrooms around this work. So I'm going to invite Dr. Montero back to put a bow on the presentation.
All right, you guys. Thank you. Weren't they awesome?
Yeah.
Yes, they were fantastic. Questions for myself or any one of us? That concludes our formal presentation. So we wanted to entertain any questions that you may have.
Okay.
President Chair.
Any questions? Yes, Ms. Hogan.
Okay, mine are really simple, but the priority schools, are those all the junior highs, or are there only certain junior highs in that group?
All junior highs. All the junior highs went through it last year. All elementary schools and all high schools are going through it this year.
Okay, so at the end of the day, everyone's priority.
At the end of the year, all of them will have presented in our symposium where they're presenting.
Okay.
Yeah, and we invite you, we'll get you the information when they do that, because it's really exciting to see all the different ways in which each school is working towards, building better community, including students, and it's just fun to hear their points of view.
Yeah, I would love to come.
Let's make sure we do that.
We would love to be invited to that.
Yeah, and then the other
Great.
question, can you tell me more about what the morning meetings are?
Oh, go ahead, Darren.
Elementary, if you've been in an elementary school, every elementary school pretty much has some type of community, whether it's to talk about the day, expectations, it could be reading centers, but that is a great space to talk about expectations of belonging and how you treat each other. And so a lot of teachers have taken advantage of that time to reinforce the kind of initiative that they've had throughout the school. So,
just a thought on that. On our website, the day in the life of a first grade teacher, you can see a morning meeting, and it's really a lot of. Are we ready to go? How was your weekend?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yes, Ms. Mercer.
Can you speak to how, as a district, we're implementing using the feedback that we've gotten from the teachers and how that is integrated across the spectrum into whether that's curriculum, whether that's just broadly how we're using and implementing that feedback?
When we first started, phase one of this work, right, was really about making sure that we had common understandings, we had processes, we had procedures. And in some ways, by design, we knew that we weren't going into, engaging teachers in a way that we knew we could. That feedback has come back to us, and our teachers are saying, man, we want to be part of this, we want to help. So the purpose of doing this focus group was for us to generate ideas, to work with teachers in engaging them more at instructional levels. So we're in that process of doing that. So I see that as part, phase 3 of our efforts. We met with how many teachers last week?
Probably about
10?
12 teachers, yeah, all from elementary schools.
Yeah, where we showed them the findings and are starting to do more of that work. But we needed to make sure that we had good systems in place to have a baseline, right? So that if any child experienced harassment of any kind, we could address it, and we would never be defined as a district that was indifferent to this work, right? And so that's where we started, right? And this is the progress that we're not making. Karen had
do you have it? I just wanted to add this point. I'm just going to give a shout out to Shoreline again. If you saw their presentation, they talked about PBIS and MTSS. And one of the things Ben and I talked about when we started is not to do this work in isolation. This is just not about OEO. We have so many departments that have skills and things that assist. And if you're asking what helps with it's PBIS.
Can you define that?
Positive behavior intervention supports. And then MTSS is multi-tiered system of support. So depending on if it's a whole school problem, then what we call a tier 2 problem, or if it's a very isolated problem, you have a team together to talk about those things, and we can infuse our belonging discussions in that. And so we've always had that. But I think we haven't really been intentional about using our spaces of belonging in that. And so our schools are doing it. They have support to do that. And so that is one way. So you can ask about what their positive behavior support systems are like at their schools and how they're infusing that. So that's a good question you can ask your schools.
Awesome, thanks.
I'll be very quick. Regarding feedback, many of the teachers who participated in this teacher focus group actually asked because they felt it was so valuable. And I know sometimes we take for granted because we live in the work, but we happen to look at the work because we do it internationally and nationally, just to let Davis School District know that it is becoming a national model of excellence for this work. And many of the teachers asked, could they turn around the teacher focus group process in the PLCs at their school so they could really get really granular at the classroom level to really implement that level of ownership. So really the feedback is permeating, and we're really creating a ripple that's turning into a wave. And I think it's important to acknowledge that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Ms.
Barber.
I think this is fantastic. I remember last year we talked about including teachers in this. It wasn't very long ago, right?
Right.
I think Board Member Powell and I both said we felt like that was a missing area.
It was this summer, in fact.
Was this? That wasn't very long. Yeah. And here we are with really great feedback. So thank you.
Yeah, the speed at which our team worked to do this research was just incredible. And the fact that we've done the research and that we're applying it it really speaks volumes of a lot of folks, right, that are involved with this. So K&D being at the, leading the way in terms of that research.
Excellent. I thought, and I would anticipate that teachers felt very heard, because a lot of times, we put this burden on them to go implement, but we don't ask them. So thank you so much.
Can you share that quote that you shared today, Dr. Dunkley? I love that. I wrote that down.
Yes.
It might have been Dr. No, it was a teacher.
No, yeah, definitely a teacher. We had the opportunity to share earlier with the Belonging Council, and many of the teachers were hesitant coming in, really participating in the focus group, and at the end, all of them expressed that they were thankful, they felt heard, valued, would like to do this again. One teacher in particular, she became very emotional, started to cry, and said that she really was apprehensive in coming, but she felt so heard and valued by the district that this became a healing moment for her. And it was overwhelming, and we allowed that pause in the room. So really very powerful.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
I do have a
that.
follow-up question on that.
Ms. Barber, and then we'll go to Ms. Stevens.
Okay. So my follow-up question is, did we have a chance for teachers? It was a lot about them implementing this belonging inclusion across the district. Was there a chance in this survey, or is there another place for them to report about their own experiences with racism?
That's an excellent question. So while we did not report on that came up a lot. Two of the groups that we had what we call a BIPOC group, Black and Teachers of Color, and they did speak to this. Other teachers who were not in those groups did speak to when they experienced that as bystanders, seeing that happening to their peers and their colleagues, and how that has informed their work. So absolutely that did come up. And one of the takeaways, in fact, in one of the reports submitted by one of the research members of the team, his report said that belonging begets belonging and inclusion begets inclusion. And in order for teachers to be able to do that, we need to create that environment as well.
Absolutely. So is there a follow-up just to make sure that teachers have the same access to resources if it does happen? More policy?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay. Thank you, President.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens.
Yeah, thank you for the work you're doing. This is really valuable feedback. I feel like what we see in the school, I've said this before, is a reflection of our communities and what's happening in our community. And I like the progress of we're reaching out to the teachers. How can we now educate parents, whether it's going to community councils and talk about what's happening in the schools or what we're seeing across the district. I feel like you talked about strength of early intervention and making sure that our parents know also what isn't expected and isn't tolerated at school, so that they can maybe be aware of needing to have those discussions at home as well. I don't know if that's something that we can help
absolutely.
educate them
one of my first presentations, I quoted a good friend of mine, Sherry Young. She's Steve Young's mother, who's, well, I'm not going to tell you Sherry's age because she would throw a shoe at me. She's really young, spirited, cute as can be. Sherry told me she grew up just right down the street here in Farmington. And when I was first coming here, I told her, Sherry, tell me about, what this community values, right? Because I wasn't as familiar with the community. She spoke about family. She spoke about feeling a sense of connection. She spoke about her faith. She spoke about making sure that everybody was taken care of, right? My sense is those values haven't changed. If anything, the more I get to know people throughout the south, central, north end of our district, we share those values. And I think we got to lean into that. I think sometimes we're afraid to speak about them for whatever reason, maybe because it's not popular or maybe because we just don't have the right words to say it. But I think we should lean into that. And I think you as board members really play a significant role in helping us with that. And we're not talking about political philosophy. We're not talking about any ideology. We remind people of that all the time. This is not some sort of, constructed political philosophy. It's not. This is simply about the words that I quoted earlier, right? About making sure that every child feels connected, making sure that they belong, making sure that they go to school without feelings of harassment, and leaning into those values that Sherry experienced when she was, you know, a freshman at Bountiful High School in the 50s. So we should talk more about this, because this doesn't happen overnight. You know, it takes a concerted effort, it takes a group effort, and I think you're really positioned well in your positions to help us with that. You know your neighbors better than anybody else. I don't know if you would add anything to that.
Yeah, I think that is the next step, and I think the perfect place to start is our community council meetings, because you know, a lot of it, you know, belief systems and things like that. I think that's a very tricky thing to kind of discuss, and I think our community council, you know, people are probably a perfect starting place for that.
Earlier this year, Director Chadley Bodley, a shout out to her, because she, you know, she really had an idea to say, hey, look, let's make sure we make part of this conversation a cadence of our school community councils with our principals. Let's make sure that they're talking about how their school is going about their belonging efforts, doing it in their own spaces, in alignment with their own values as a school. So we need to, we've talked to the principals about that, we've trained them about that, we just need to make sure we're following up with that. So, but I think that's low-hanging fruit that we need to continue to, you know, to build on.
And I'll just add that this did come up today in our belonging council meeting, and it was brought up by one of our parents, and then I seconded it because I really feel it's important to get our community councils involved as much as possible and informed as much as possible about this work.
Yeah.
They will help us.
And believe me, every parent wants to talk about how their children or their child is connecting at their school.
Yes. Yes, that's right. Okay, any more questions, Ms. Powell?
Yeah, first of all, Dr. Dunkley, I love that you put the teacher quotes in there. I love that you pull them out. It was just so helpful, because we get, you know, it's good to get summaries, abstract summaries as well, but to get the quotes, it really kind of gave perspective of how they feel, and I appreciate that. The other thing was kind of follow up with what Ms. Barber was saying. On community councils have there, especially because our district has several dual immersion, language immersion schools, have we done any encouragement of the foreign language teachers to be involved in community councils, to input on that? Because I see a lot of those people not involved in community councils, and I want to make sure that those teachers feel included as well, included within their teacher community and school community.
That actually came up, and when we convened the teachers last Friday, that actually came up, and they see that that is a challenge. So they are aware that's an issue. They're now trying to figure out ways to address it. And I think the report that she talked about today, and then our conversation that we had with them, I think it's a jump start to kind of get those things going. And so I just want to let you know that was actually brought up and by one of the teachers, where they're seeing a concern there.
And, you know, as a school district, we really want to honor the independence of each community council, and you know, they're elected by their peers, and you know, so we're thoughtful in how much we recommend versus just sharing what we're doing as a school district from an initiative standpoint. But I think, you know, Ms. Powell, that's a good reminder, right? To especially the schools that have those programs, to engage those parents in these conversations, because I think they're very passionate about it as well.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not saying necessarily give a quota on teacher, stuff like that, but
sure.
But community councils are open to the public, so you
Absolutely.
can encourage participation, whether or not they're actually, you know, people are voted on by their peers. But
yeah, good points.
Okay.
Anything else?
Any other questions
I
or
just had a
comments?
quick question for Dr. Montero. So on your quarterly or second quarter report, you had talked about how 18% of them were deemed harassment, 58% not harassment but policy violations, and the next level 15% not policy violations, and then last there was not enough evidence. Can you give me?
Yeah, Ben told me about.
Oh, sorry, I got that wrong. So, can you give me just a concrete example of what would fall in each of those categories?
You bet. So harassment would meet our 3 prongs that I went over.
Right.
Okay. And so a policy violation would hit 1 or 2 of the other prongs, or maybe a student's engaging in creating a hostile environment, right? Where they're saying something that may be based on a protected class, but it's not targeted toward a complainant. Perhaps they're really frustrated and they yell the N-word, right, in front of a group of students.
Okay.
We would classify that as a policy violation. Of something that we investigate, that we conclude, actually the kid is fine in what they were doing. And so that would be not a policy violation because it didn't break our policy, nor did it arise to harassment. So it was an allegation was reported to us. And our charge is to look into and investigate every allegation of harassment made. And then the last one, insufficient evidence, we operate under the more likely than not. And so sometimes we have 2 students that we can't determine whether the conduct occurred because there's nothing that pushes it in one way or the other. That's a quick synopsis. You have any clarifying questions?
That's great. Thank
Okay.
you. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And I just want to add, right, that the number one driver after we work with our students, whether it's a student who's submitting a complaint or who's responding to a complaint, is to educate, and to make sure we approach that, that those situations, they're sensitive, and that they're filled with emotion, and we're cognizant of that, and we want to make sure that children feel supported on on both ends. So
One more question around that.
Ms. Stevens.
Also.
Yep.
Mr. Hill, with the cases that you, the data that you have, I was just curious if you broke down, like, of the cases that are harassment, which were in high school, junior high, elementary school, like if there was a breakdown of those, and then also like in elementary school, if you're seeing a trend that it's 4th grade, that's when they're really coming out at, or, like if it stays the same.
So we do have that data prepared. We don't have it with us tonight, but we can absolutely share it with you.
You do break it down that
and
way.
then when we see trends that are happening, we call them hotspots. And that's when our team will either go in and do even a classroom level intervention or grade level intervention is really common. And we do that through assemblies, Words Matter assemblies, things like that. So that's how we're responding. And as explained earlier today to the Belonging Council, the hotspot travels a little bit around the school district because we know that how things travel. So it's not always the same places. That these
like
things
with
are
the
happening.
TikTok trend.
Like with
Yes.
TikTok trends.
Got it.
And, yeah.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Can I ask just one quick?
Yes,
I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Powell. Yep.
Just quick. So in Dr. Dunkley's presentation, it talked about some teachers saying, hey, there's kids that don't even know what the N-word means. How are we supposed to teach them what not to say? Like, how do you guys address that?
That one's it. Oops, sorry.
Musical microphone.
Yeah. I mean, starting at the beginning here, we learned, last year from our professional development that, maybe we're giving too many examples on what not to say versus how you treat each other. And so a lot of times, let's say you do have a young child that uses the word. Now, at that point is when the education part comes in. So depending on grade level, understanding, we learned, obviously, maybe being mindful of the type of examples that you're sharing, because we got a lot of feedback from the public and schools and saying, hey, we know what the message, what you're trying to say, but through saying, don't say this, don't use that word, we're actually providing some language and some artillery, I guess you would say, for some of our students. And so it works both ways. We know there's a lot of students that do know what those words are, and we're educating, but when we have those students that don't and they're involved in it just comes from an educational approach. So we've listened and modified, and we're going to continue to do that.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, any more questions from the board? Superintendent.
I just want to take a minute to commend this group. there is not more challenging work that we've done as a district than what this group has taken on. It's just incredibly grateful to have the guidance of a strong consulting team, and then our OEO team under Dr. Montero. Incredible, difficult, challenging, hot seat kind of work. That there's a reason why school districts don't take this on around the country. Mm-hmm. It's complicated and it's paradoxical, and these guys have approached it like the startup and really learned a lot, and hopefully, to echo Dr. Dunkley, hopefully we'll help the rest of the country improve. We're certainly trying to help the rest of the state improve in this space, and do this work in a way that's practical and meaningful, and we start measuring how we move the needle. So literally any kind of data in the world you can get from this group, and because we measure it and we care about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was just gonna say, we got to recognize our great leader here, and because we don't do any of this work without his support, mm-hmm. Dr. Linford, and really all of our colleagues that are in this room today. Mm-hmm. Last week, if you attended the basketball tournament at Bountiful High School, and what our foundation did in collaboration with our special education, programs, if you look at the work that our directors are doing to support principals. I mean, this is a real team effort, and I'm so proud of our school district. Sometimes we look at our data and we think, oh my goodness, do we share this? Because some of it, like, folks are honest with us, right? Mm-hmm. And yet I get reminded by that quote that the brightest light casts the darkest shadow, right? And most districts they're not even looking, right? They're not even looking to find out what's going on, and yet here we are, asking the hard questions, asking how we get better, asking our students, asking our teachers, asking our parents, taking that feedback and just making progress. But, a tribute to our superintendent for, saying, hey, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to prioritize. And this is what makes us academically a stronger organization, stronger than anybody else that, would want to compete with us. This is what distinguishes us. So thank you for your support as a board and for the work that we're doing.
Well, thank you so much. This was an outstanding presentation. Yes, outstanding presentation. So helpful, informative to us as board members. We appreciate this important work that you are leading in our district, and it is important work, and it's important to each one of us. And Mr. Hill, Mr. Nash, Dr. Montero, Dr. Dunkley, thank you so much. For what you're doing, and it's making a difference, and we want to continue this work. So that concludes our workshop for tonight, and thanks everyone for being here, and off we go with